Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Rich Willega, and I'm with AVAP. We're a Workday services partner. We're based out of Columbus, Ohio, and I run our government practice. And we're here today to talk a little bit about digital transformation with Workday, specifically in the higher ed and public sector. Yeah. Everybody hear me? We're told to talk loud, and we're all good. All right. All right. But before we get going, it's like if anybody needs to get out any energy or anything, do a scream. Melissa, should we get some energy out? All right. So before I introduce these folks here, I appreciate everybody attending. Workday and implementing kind of big ERP type programs aren't easy, but they can be fun, and they require a lot of, I would say, just perseverance, leadership, planning. And we have some folks up here representing, first is Noel Walkingshaw with Salt Lake City. He's their Chief Innovation Officer, and he's been their, I was called their czar behind this effort for years. And then also we have Jim Sir. He's the Chief Information Officer of Joliet Junior College right outside of Chicago. Again, has been kind of the inspirational leader in driving this out. So I think that we're pretty fortunate to have both individuals here share some of their experiences, and then hopefully we get some dialogue going back and forth, and hopefully can help you answer some questions and think through some things. So with that, what I want to do is just turn it over, Noel and Jim, kind of how you want to go at this, just a little more introduction of yourself, your organization, and where you guys both are on your Workday journey right now.
Go ahead, Jim. Thanks, Noel. Good morning, everybody. Great to see everybody this morning. Thanks for coming out. Really appreciate the opportunity here that Workday and AVAP has afforded myself and Joliet Junior College to talk to you all this morning. I am the Chief Information Officer at Joliet Junior College. Been there for about 9.5 years in a full-time capacity. We started our Workday journey really kind of back in 2015 when we started kicking the tires on modernized solutions that were starting to emerge in the higher education marketplace, specifically around the student system. We knew that HR and finance were a little bit more mature from a product offering and modernization. A fully cloud-enabled product was available sometime before that, but really our goal being in higher education, of course, was that focus on modernizing our student system. And that's really when we put our RFP out on the street, really wasn't until 2018. So it really took us 3 years to get the college community and our culture acclimated and ready for a journey that we were going to embark upon, really starting in 2019 when we sought for and received board approval at that time. And that was for HR, finance, and the student system. We made the request of the board in 2019, signed contracts, I think about January of 2020, officially kicked off our product in February of 2020. And then guess what happened in March of 2020? Of course, the pandemic hits. But we only paused our project for about a month. And with the great support of our partner, AVAP, we kicked that project off in late April, and we've been running ever since. So we went live with platforms, so HR and finance in July of 2021. We went live with student recruiting and admissions in October of 2021. And then this year, we've also gone live with Workday Planning, our first phase of Workday Planning to modernize the college's budget planning process went live in February in only a 6-week time window for that implementation. Very aggressive timeline that we implemented Workday Planning, and then recently just completed with AVAP's help our first use case in Workday Prism Analytics. And then as I sit here today, I'd be remiss to not thank the efforts of our great teams back in Chicago, both our staff at the college, AVAP staff. This week we have an on-site going on, and it's because of the great work of our teams that I get to sit before you here today. And so I'd be remiss to not recognize and thank our teams back in Chicago for the incredible efforts. Doing all this largely virtually through a pandemic has been a monumental task. And again, I have to thank our teams, recognize our teams, because without them, I couldn't sit here before you today. So we are also in the midst probably the most critical part of our student phase 2 implementation. We are kicking off this week with AVAP our end-to-end testing, which will take us through the end of the calendar year as we get ready to move to production for a fall 2023 registration. But that means we have to be ready to go early next spring with when we'll be fully live on HR, finance, and the student system within Workday. So, Rich, I know that's a lot, but that's our journey in a nutshell.
That was great, honestly. Noel?
Hi, I'm Noel Waggenshaw. Like Rich said, I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City is the capital city of Utah. We started on this project about 2 years ago. Prior to this, I was the Deputy Director of Public Services, and I've been with the city for about 24 years doing a lot of different work. Along the way, I would get some enterprise projects to manage. Salt Lake City was in sort of a unique situation in that our current financial system was implemented in 1993. I think we have, the current count is something like 30 different pieces of software that we're looking to collapse into this. Many of them are old in-house built pieces of software that are generally the technology is expiring. We have a bit of that happening in the city. So we spent a bunch of time. I spent about almost a year doing organizational readiness. I was able to build a small team of communications people to run alongside our technologists. And we are now live with the HCM, and we are in the process of payroll, time, absence, benefits, and the finance. Our finance customer confirmation systems are happening this week, and in 2 weeks we kick off the adaptive. Our plan is get all the technical work largely completed by the end of this year, and then our go live will be in March. And we wanted to give ourselves some time to make sure that with payroll and time and the changes that we're making there, to make sure that we have a long runway to make sure folks know how to use the system when it's time to clock in, and we're able to do that. And we were anxious that trying to do that during the Christmas break while we're trying to do our year-end financials and all of those other things. I have 3 unions that all have different rules and responsibilities. And so we felt like we wanted to give ourselves a good window to make our team ready to use the system and have a strong communications plan in tow for that. And so, yeah, I'm sort of like, I feel like I'm while I'm the project lead, I'm feeling like maybe the least valuable player right now, because right now I've got everybody back home doing all the work and all the subject matter experts doing all the testing, and I don't know how they do their jobs. And so I came out here alone. Next year we'll have a big group of people attending, and they're really excited for it.
Thank you. Noel and I were talking, kind of, Jim, you were saying all the people are back in Chicago. Yeah. Noel said to me, he goes, I feel like things are going good back in Salt Lake City. Is anybody texting you? I have a feeling that, because I work with Noel quite a bit, he goes, I have a feeling they're not telling me things because not to stress me out. And I said, well, I'm not getting any texts, so maybe they don't want to stress me out either. So I think it's pretty good. So I will say, specifically in my experience working with Salt Lake City and just ERP programs in general, leadership and decision making on these type of programs don't start when a project starts. So what I want to ask for both of you, and start maybe with you, Noel, from a governance standpoint, how did that come, the model, how did it start and how has it evolved?
Well, it started, we built a team before we wrote an RFP. I've done enterprise permitting for the city, operations and maintenance systems, and so I've learned some hard lessons along the way, and knew that I needed to have a good, strong team before we went through that process and already start communicating. I wanted everyone to know what ERP meant before we even selected a vendor. And so we built a real strong traditional team, with the chief administrative officer as our executive sponsor, and our deputy city council, director, HR, finance, and IT is our sponsor team. And then I've built a nice long a collection, like I said, my team, the innovation team. I gathered the best communications and public policy people that I could find in the city to be on that team. And then we built a nice group of technologists inside those various work groups to make sure that we had that piece covered. And so we tried to set all of that expectation of what that would be before we made that selection, and we really worked on the roles, the responsibilities, and the relationships that we would have, because we knew that it would be hard, and if we created a safe space early when it got hard, it would be easier.
Jim?
You know, I think, Rich, for us, it started really during the RFP process where we established a team of about 20 folks, cross-functional, represented across the college, co-chaired by myself and one of our leaders in academic affairs to make sure that we had all of the voices appropriately at the table during that very critical RFP and evaluation process as we went through that. And that one of the best decisions we made, and this is just speaking for our institution, everybody's organization is unique, of course, but we hired an independent program manager. So that program manager, although he advocates on behalf of the college, wears the college's badge, really sits between the college, our implementation partner, AVAP, and Workday, and helps us to navigate, negotiate, identify risks, identify solutions, mitigate risks, and we try to push decisions down as close to the project teams as we can. But one of the great things that our program manager did is just established a really solid and structured governance structure from the outset of our program, and we've lived by that since day one, and it's worked extremely well for us. It governs the way we make decisions. It governs the way we meet on a routine basis. It governs the way the project is executed. It governs the way we meet milestones, the way we celebrate successes, all of the things that you would expect in a program of this size, scale, and complexity. But having that independent program manager has been a critical decision for us, and one that has helped enable our success, throughout our program.
Okay, thank you. So none of these programs work without people, right? And in, I would say, any industry, but specifically public sector, higher ed, it's not like there's 4 people that can just backfill and do jobs. And these types of programs, I mean, from an expectation setting, and Workday as a deployment there's some standard things that aren't normal as far as what people knew from on-premise solutions. It's a different way of thinking. So my question to you, start with Jim, is just, as you're building out your deployment team, not necessarily folks that will ultimately be using the system, like all the employees of somewhere, what would you give some advice about setting up that team? What did you learn? Things like that, because it can be tough.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a tough question. I'll say it very simply, and this is probably obvious, but the team is everything, right? The team is why I get to sit here and do these fun things like this week. But without the right team in place, it can be very detrimental, or certainly impact your ability to execute and ultimately be successful. And you literally need all hands on deck. And I'll tell you, when we made that decision to go with Workday, and we got through a very tough evaluation process, we were still, a college divided in 2 camps. Roughly 50% of the folks felt like Workday was the right decision. Roughly 50% of the folks wanted to go a different direction. And some of the people that were probably the largest adversaries of the decision that we ultimately made are now some of they are our biggest advocates for not only the decision, but they've become the go-to people and the subject matter experts on our program and on this project. So you literally need everybody. You're not going to convince everybody even after you've gone live on 2 or 3 or 4 different modules and you've hit milestones and you've been successful, you're still not going to get 100% of everybody on board. There's always going to be things that people are going to want to key in on and say, well, the old system did this and the new system doesn't do it this way, or it can't do that, or the product maturity is not where it needs to be to do this. But you need to hear from the folks that were the adversaries, that were the detractors. Those have to be your sounding board people on your teams as well, because they will be your best truth tellers, and you have to hear both sides. Everything can't be looked at through rose-colored glasses. You need those people in your organization that can be the truth tellers, that bring up the tough issues, that tell you about the product limitations. So all of the people on the team, and I know that may sound a little cliche, but you need to hear all voices when you're going through a program of this size, scale, and complexity without question. Okay. So hopefully somewhere in that I answered the question.
We're going to come back to that more a bit around change management as an official program. So, but then Noel, again, like building out your team too, like, and what is that, how's that been in just making sure the day job happens as this project keeps going?
Yeah, I mean, we were pretty deliberate about, sort of, I hate to use the phrase sort of leaving folks behind to manage the day to day, and we try to partition that, but we were very deliberate in making sure that we keep the lights on. And it's not easy keeping the lights on. It takes almost 2 full weeks to run payroll at Salt Lake City because you've got to, it's complicated. And, sometimes it just doesn't work, and when we give ourselves an extra day and we got to run a whole new set of scripts to get things to work. But yeah, I think that we identified like the key players, like, okay, these are the positions that we need to be successful, and we found luckily the right folks to fill those positions. And then we've done a lot of, I think that what we really focused on, I think, is that sponsor model, and having really strong engagement with leadership, and I will say that having them very present in this conversation is important, and I think that's helped us a lot. We've said from the beginning is it's a place for discussion, it's a place for debate. You have to build safety and you have to build trust. And in a place like Salt Lake City, we have we have an airport, we have utilities, we have all of these different types of funding mechanisms and different organizations. So it's almost like running 15 independent businesses. And each finance manager has done different things, and intergovernmentally, trust has been hard. And so bringing all of those folks to the table, right? Like making sure that they have that voice, that they can have that engagement, that we're driving together to a better solution, right? Today we're doing customer confirmation budgets. I'll have probably 10 of the 15 departments with a finance manager there representing, making sure that they go along, and hopefully that helps with our adoption. And then we knew that we would have to iterate our team, right? We have to iterate our team, and we always have to come back together and say, okay, am I in the right role? Okay, well, this is where we need to go, and we've been very iterative, and we're already starting to talk about, what happens once we're live. We have a plan for ongoing administration, but we really need to have a long debate about what that truly looks like, because we've learned a lot along the way. So constantly focusing on the team.
It's good. And then with that, I don't want to lead the witness, but I'm thinking about this intentionally as you took on these projects. You guys, one can go like change management, a comprehensive program. Was that something that was very built in and valued? You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think we identified pretty early on that change management was going to be a critical component of our success ultimately going forward. In fact, 2 years before we even kicked off our project, I created a position called Technology Training and Communications Specialist, which was really meant to kind of be a change management role, but I wanted that person ready to go by the time we kicked off this program, because I knew how important it was going to be to our success as we were going into to our Workday implementation. That position has now been upgraded to an organizational change manager position, which sits in IT but has holistic change management responsibility across the organization, and very much focused on our Workday implementation at this point. So we have a function now, a formal function of change management that sits in my area. We leveraged our partnership with AVAP, who brought very critical change management skills and capabilities to the table as part of our program. And of course, with Workday Delivery Assurance, they're going to hold us accountable to that implementation methodology. And a large part of that is reviewing change management and how you're going about that, what the strategies are. They bring a lot of change management support and resource to the table, along with AVAP, which was helpful to us. But so during that, our platform deployment, we leveraged AVAP's change management and Workday heavily. And then as we learned more about the methodology and had our own people internally, we've taken over more of that change management responsibility. But it's critical. It's even more critical now after go live. I think when you're going through an implementation, all the focus, energy, and effort is on getting to that go live. But I'm here to tell you that the work starts once you go live. It certainly doesn't end. And certainly doing all this through the pandemic, we didn't have a lot of opportunity to bring folks together, to have that collaborative learning, collaborative training, people looking over each other's shoulder, coming up with solutions, ideas, learning together. A lot of that is missed when you're trying to do all of this virtually. So now we're having to come back. We've done some surveys. We're assessing the level of knowledge and competency within Workday, within our business processes, and then coming in behind that with more change management and support resource. Training is certainly a big part of that as well. But that is something that it doesn't start and end with the program or the project. It's something that you have to embed and integrate throughout, and it's got to be sustainable well beyond your go live, especially as you think about workforce transition, people leaving organizations coming in. You have new people coming in all the time. You have knowledge leaving the organization all the time as well. So if you don't systematize change management, the likelihood of you getting to the level of adoption you want within the platform is going to be severely diminished, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, for Salt Lake City, it's similar in that respect. We're replacing aging, failing technologies, and so beyond the technology, the city is ambitious in moving forward with modernizing our policies and the procedures that we do around budgeting. We're transitioning from line item budgeting to program-based budgeting. We have a very strong commitment to transparency in government. Years ago, I worked on open government, open data policy work for the city, and so we knew that we set some pretty high values of the system early. And again, when we started the team, we knew that we needed to establish a good way to have communications. And so my team wasn't even a team then. It was sort of informal. I was still at Public Services. And but we brought a couple directors, IMS, finance, our technology team leads, and a handful of others. 9 of us went through change management certification training early in the process because, again, we were trying to build a culture of change, and we needed more people to understand sort of the new way that we would be working together and communicating, so that we could try to create that sort of safer space and recognize that, when someone so that someone in IT can recognize that when someone's acting out, it's not because they don't like you, it's just because of something else, right? They're anxious or something like that, and to give those folks some good skills as well. We are using AVAP change management, and that's been great service. The training piece that comes along with that has been really amazing. That was an area where I learned a lot. We were really lucky. We have a person in our HR, one of our training folks, joined the team full time to help support that. My team in the change management and communications helps with the training material development, but they're leading that, and we've been able to really focus on that. But I think that change management now. We're doing change management 101 classes with all of our change champions, with our finance manager. So we're trying to instill that concept beyond this Workday project, right? We go live in about 6 months. We'll go through a stabilization period, but my team doesn't necessarily dissolve, right? And while we aren't technologists, we still have the big goals that the city set forward around modernizing how we relate to our citizens. So we'll take that piece on after this is live, right? Because it's really just sort of that tool to help to manage the transactions, but it's not the end goal.
All right, so I got one more question, then we'll open it up for folks. We'll leave at least 10 minutes for that or more. But so Jim and Noel, they take a lot of calls. You guys, some people in this room may have called them for understanding things about Workday or some type of references. And I think it's just what I want to hear is like, maybe what happens during those calls? Maybe what do you find surprising that maybe somebody asked that you didn't think of? Or what do you find that people don't ask and then maybe you wanting to tell people? So you guys can kind of.
It's a good question. I take a fair number of calls, and I'm always happy to have those conversations. I love talking to my peers and really kind of understanding more about what their goals and what their programs are and some of the ideas that they want to leverage or take forward within their own organization. So no matter what, Rich, it's always just an interesting conversation. I spend more time listening than I do talking, I think. Just I want to hear kind of what some of the problems are. Have they really baked out that business justification and the reasons for why they want to go forward with that program? Do they have cross-functional support? Have they really considered all of the things that you need to consider in programs of this size, scale, and complexity? So I think for me, I spend a lot of time listening. I think all the questions that I get are the ones that you certainly expect to get. The big question, I think, really right off the bat is, how have you been successful? I think that's a question that I get more often than not. You're always going to get the feature functionality questions, price questions. How did you do project management? How did you train folks? So you're going to get all those questions. But I think how have you been successful is the question that I really like to speak to with my peers and really kind of understand. Have you really kind of thought this thing through? Have you gone through all of the things necessary in your journey at your institution or at your organization that's going to allow you ultimately to be successful? And so, like I said, the conversations are always just very insightful. I learn a lot. I like to hear what their challenges are or some of the things that they want to implement that might be different, or they may have a unique approach that I hadn't considered. So it's always, for me, I think maybe that's the answer, is that I always learn a lot in having that dialogue with my peers as well. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, similar. Sometimes I guess I feel like I rush through those so that I can start asking questions. But I think a lot of times, I think we often get like the very technical questions, right? Does single sign-on work? Right? That one gets asked a lot. Things like that, and I typically talk to folks. The technology pieces, you can work through those. And again, for me, it's been, how have you focused your team? How have you done your team readiness? How are you prepared to work with someone, right? I mean, that was a big part of our process, right? Like, I don't want to, work. We don't want to find someone that we just don't get along, right? And so I know that it's, building trust with your partner is really, really important so that you can have those conversations. Paul is our EM back in Salt Lake. He's there right now. He and I are, built a foundation right out of the gate to be able to ask hard questions of each other and not get upset, because it's going to be hard. And so I often talk to folks a lot about that, right? How are you preparing yourselves for this? Because it really is hard. And implementation is a short period of time. You really got to be making that long-term commitment. So how are you looking at those long-term commitments? And how are you preparing your team to do that? And what is the engagement level of leadership, right? I've had calls when I've asked, what is the engagement of your leadership? They're like, oh yeah, they support it, but they're not really going to engage. And, that makes me really anxious when I hear that, because you're going to need resources. You're going to need to be able to help, as much as you want change management to, help just solve the Rubik's Cube. Sometimes there's a little muscle involved, right? And having those relationships are really important. So I've enjoyed them. One of the things in the pandemic, but for the pandemic, I didn't go to a lot of conferences. I would just fly to other cities and I would sit in their lobby and just watch how they work. And I would do field trips. I've done field trips all over the country to different cities to learn, and just, a week job shadowing someone in another city is, for me, almost as good as a conference sometimes. And so I've missed that. And so I think these reference calls have been good for that. It's helped me sort of reconnect with that broader local government community, which I just adore.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'm one glad too that we're actually back here. I've been here since 19. That's probably for your first one, Rising. It's a great event when you haven't been going to them and you're in this world working, and you kind of miss that. But we have about 14 minutes left, right? So we have, obviously, I think you've heard from Jim and Noel. There's a lot of information and knowledge there. So is there opening up any questions folks have, and take advantage of some opportunity here, or even after the session? We're in room 19. Jim and Noel will be there for any more one-on-one type questions. But anyone? Shy group? Do you want me to lead a question for you? What's the one thing you would tell them? Like, I know it's kind of feeding on the question right now, the one lesson learned.
Well, we learned a lot of lessons. We're still learning lessons today, especially going through all this in a pandemic, and hopefully, we're starting to emerge, but certainly still not out of the woods. Hopefully, more of my conversations with folks are not how to do this in a pandemic, although I think we have a great case study at some point on this implementation and our success as a result. I think your people are your most important asset during these programs. Our team and our organization has been exhausted. It's probably a light way to say that over the course. Pandemic was one thing, but then you throw once in 30 years transformational program on top of that, and we've broken some folks' backs. I'm here to tell you, and I'm not afraid to say that. But your people, I think the lesson is without your people, there's no way in heck that you have any chance at all to succeed. So you have to do whatever you can to take care of your people, and that's not always easy, especially when you have projects that you're trying to execute, timelines that you're trying to execute, milestones that you need to get to, data conversion work that has to get done, end-to-end testing that has to get completed on schedule. You have 1,000 different personalities at the table at any one given time, and you got to pay attention to how those folks either are or are not working together, because that can make or break, a piece of the project success as well. And I think for us, it's been great to have a partner with AVAP where I can, if I have to, because I sit in a lot of meetings just to observe and listen and hear what's going on. But if I have to make a call to some folks, they may or may not be in this room, but if I have to make a call and say, hey, Joe Smith, your finance consultant, and Jane Doe, our controller, are not seeing eye to eye right now on the project, and I think it's impeding our success. You have to roll up your sleeves as leaders of these programs and monitor for those kind of situations, but then actually get in the mix and figure out how you're going to bring that back together. And sometimes the two personalities just don't work together, and you gotta figure out how you're going to deal with that, either by moving some pieces around or getting other people in the mix that can kind of help facilitate a better process there. So I think people is probably my answer to that question. The other thing for me is, as much as you possibly can, make the ask to your board one time. We've lived by that since day one. We made the ask to the board. We've stayed within the budget of what we've asked. We built in a lot of dollars for contingency We've built in a lot of dollars for backfill and additional staff resources and consulting through a variety of partners, but as much as you possibly can, make that board ask one time, because that is a very difficult conversation to go back and have with your cabinet team, with your president, and ultimately with your board of directors as well. So, thank you. No?
Probably for me, the big lesson learned for me was testing, and sort of my experience in testing has been pretty sort of traditional project team oriented with a little bit of user experience testing, and the testing at the scale that we are at required us to bring a lot of folks in, and from the beginning we weren't super well organized, and I think that we lost some time, obviously, because we didn't set expectations the right way. And then also I think that what we've seen is someone goes and they're like, well, it didn't do what I think it to do, and I didn't really have a good job signing in, so I'm just going to go have some coffee, or I'm just going to go do something else, right? And they didn't say I couldn't do it, right? Like, we had a long conversation with a group the other day that said, if it didn't work for you, it failed, right? Write some notes. Like, it's okay. Like, I think that, I don't think we're at 100% yet, and we've got, I brought some dedicated resources to improve that expectation, improve that communication, but really kind of slow walking and repeat, and creating a safe space around that testing, I think, is really important. The testing, ownership starts to land on us on that testing piece, right? And that's an area where initially we weren't super well prepared, and it's cost us a little bit, right? And we're catching up, we're fine. But I think that's an area where I would tell folks, have dedicated resources, have a solid plan, effectively communicate that it's okay to fail, right? Accountants hate to fail something, right? And it's like, no, you can do it. Failure is feedback, and so it doesn't mean that someone sucks. And so it took us a little while to build that, and we're now like all of a sudden we're like, oh, okay, we went from like 90% not started to like 30% not started in a really short time, and we had, wasn't everything passed, but we were gathering feedback, right, and creating that. So for me, a strong communication plan around the testing expectations and a dedicated resource, someone to really help create just the coordination of it all, because at scale it's complicated, and it's easy to it's easy for people to sneak away, because especially in this virtual world where it's independent and things like that. So for me, testing was a really important lesson, and moving forward, we will have a solid testing plan on all projects.
Sure. All right.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. You talked about people. You talked about keeping the lights on. We went live last year, and we've got people keeping the lights on. And how have you staffed, and what's your plan for tomorrow? Because we still need those people today, and they're on the legacy apps. They've been there for 10, 15 years, some of them, and at the same time, we want them to be reskilled to get there, but they still got to keep the lights on. So we've got consultants, we've got contractors, but at the end of the day, they're going to move on, and we're going to be left holding the bag.
One of the things that we've done with that is, the folks that are keeping the lights on are still part of the team. Like, they come to the weekly meetings, they come to the stand-ups. They may not have like exact assignments in the implementation itself, but they're still part of the conversation. So we're trying to bring them along, The folks that are going to manage HRIS are taking the classes, taking the training. They're trying to come along. And I think one area where we got kind of lucky, not lucky that our controller retired, but our controller said, hey, I'm retiring in a year. So one of the things that we asked for was a controller position in the budget at 18 months or whatever the time period was, and we were able to bring on a new controller. So our controller that was retiring became a major part of our team, right? And so we were able to do a little bit of backfill in that respect, and a controller that's got 25 years of experience knows where all the bodies are laying, right? And knows how all of this stuff can happen, and so she was really instrumental in that. We also reconstructed our chart of accounts. So we did not know the origin of our chart of accounts. 1993, we copy pasted, and it was an absolute mess. And so she was able to help us with that reconstruction as well. So we got a little lucky there. But I think for us, one of the things that we're trying to do is even though those folks are not necessarily in the build sessions all the time, they are still a part of the team. They come to the stand-ups, they come to the weekly report outs, they haven't been forgotten. And there's definitely going to be a catch-up period where we try to help them skill, but hopefully it's not, well, you just don't know anything about it now. They should know the issues, they should know the things, they should be a part of it. And we brought in, it's not a lot of people, it's 4 or 5 different technologists, but we are keeping them engaged, just not full-time.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. As you know, being live a year post-implementation support is critical because our teams, from a acclimation to the product, are not where they need to be because they've been fully focused either in the Workday implementation itself and getting to the go live, or supporting our legacy platforms and applications so we can continue to serve our students and customers for us. We just renewed our post-implementation support for year 2. It's a critical part of how we need to operate right now as we go through the rest of our implementation. I've said it 1,000 times. I talk to our program manager on a daily basis, and he's tired of hearing me say this, but we as an organization need to take more control and ownership of this Cadillac that we've invested in. Cadillac being Workday, of course. But we're not there yet, right? Because we're still very much in implementation. People are still very much focused either on implementation activities or supporting legacy platforms. So getting that user, getting the skills and competencies up to the level that they need to be, plus having them with enough bandwidth, right, to focus and dedicate to learn and understand and increase that skill and competency. We're just not in a place where it's reasonable for us to ask our staff to take that on in addition to everything else that's going on. So having that post-implementation support is critical part of our operating environment right now. I'm committed in year 2 this year to try to take more of that ownership, from our consulting partners so we can be more self-sufficient and sustainable as we go forward. But I'm here to tell you, it's going to take us a few years because we'll go live with the rest of student next year. Then we'll be in another year of post-implementation support on the student platform while hoping to increase our skills and competencies in HR and finance. But it's going to be a journey here for a few years till we kind of figure out what you asked. And that's my question too, is how are we going to get our staff to a place where they can be more self-sufficient, not only self-sufficient, but they can actually leverage the investment that we've made in Workday. And that's the vision, right? That's the vision that us as leaders hopefully go in, is that we can leverage this modern technology for the return on investment that we've put together. But that's going to take some number of years for us to kind of get to that sweet spot, if you will, I think.
Okay. Because we have 1 minute to this last question, so it's good.
Hello, a higher ed specific question perhaps, but Can you talk about your feedback mechanism? Like, do you use a ticketing system, and
Yep.
how you're transparent with the campus about knowing what you're working on and what you're not?
It's a great question. I'll take a shot at that quickly. I wanted to say this earlier when we were talking about change management, but we have a great change management strategy, a plan, and a structure around how we do change management. We have a great leader. Shout out to Susanna if she's online watching. We have a monthly change agent network meeting that we have over 100 people on every month, where we have our program manager go through the status of the program, timelines, critical successes, etc. Our organizational change manager leads that meeting and the agenda. We have 100 folks engaged that we have dialogue on a monthly basis at least. But one of the great sections that she's put into that CAN meeting is what we call Workday Wins. So we solicit feedback and input from the community on what is a win in a business process or something that we've improved over a legacy system that we then put on a slide in that meeting. Here are the Workday wins that the community has submitted for this month that we bring into our change agent meeting as well. So that's, I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I want to give you kind of a little bit of a snippet. But we do pulse surveys as well. We just did a survey on our user adoption for HR finance with that population of folks to solicit input and feedback on how we're doing there and what are the things that we need to watch out for and try to get additional training or support or resource around our implementation there as well. So, thank you.
Similar model for us. We've got the change networks. My team manages a lot of the communications. We've got ongoing surveys that go out, and we've got a dedicated email address that people can email if they have comments, questions, concerns. We have a feedback, an anonymous feedback panel if someone really wants to say something and doesn't want us to know. We've had very few people communicate with us that way. And then we try to be really mindful informally, right? Like whenever we get together, we ask people how are they feeling, whatever, and try to find different ways to listen in those ways. Taco trucks at the city hall, ice cream socials, things like that, to bring the team together in person to have those subtle conversations.
And we are out of time. So I thank you all for taking the time and listening. We're going to be moving. We'll be at room, I think, 19. I think that's room 19. If you want a little more one-on-one conversations. But again, thank you. Really much appreciate it.